Sounds like it got better. Thank you.
Ready recording? All right. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Davis. Present. Councilmember Hagenow.
Present.
Councilmember Kerr. Present. Councilmember Grant.
Aye.
Councilmember Sullivan.
Here.
Councilmember Fistev. Mayor Riley.
Present.
There are 6 members present.
Thank you very much. Now we have a public comment period, and anyone who would like to speak on any of the items on the agenda for this work session is welcome to come forward to the podium or raise your hand online. And you have 3 minutes to provide your comments to council, and we're eagerly waiting to hear. No one in the room? Is there anyone online? Maddie, anyone online?
No.
No one online. In that case, I'll close the public comment period. And our first item is mental health and building hope. And I've been eagerly waiting for the presentation. Kellen, is it?
That's correct. Yep. Callan and Kristen.
All right. Please proceed.
I'm going to share my screen here. Looks like that worked.
Is there, yeah, there. So again, my name is Kellen Ender, and this is Kristen Griffin. We're here with Building Hope, and we are a mental health organization really devoted to bringing access, stigma reduction, and increasing capacity for care for mental health within our community, our Summit County residents and families. So anyone who lives or works in Summit County has eligibility to become part of our programming and take advantage of the resources that we have in our community. So we're really, really grateful and thankful to be here today. A little bit about what we're going to speak on is Building Hope, and an outside consultant named Dr. Nancy Vandemark did a assessment in the community, and we've done these kind of over time, number of times, from 2018 until now, to really look at where our system of care is, how we've developed it, and what gaps have been filled within our system, and then also where we need to still address some of those needs for our community. So what we're here to talk about is a little bit of data background, and then also kind of where we're going from here, and what we do and what we've accomplished, and then what we hope to do for the next couple of years. So thank you guys so much for having us here today. I'm going to share with Kristen to go over some of the data.
Great.
Perfect. Thank you, Kellen. So like Kellen mentioned, I will be presenting on 6 major trends that were found in regards to the status of our mental health here in Summit County through that needs assessment that was just conducted last year by Dr. Nancy Vandemark. So here's a high-level overview of the 6 trends. Just to save time, I'm not going to read them off this slide. We'll go kind of more in depth through all 6. So we'll go ahead and just dive right in.
Can you maximize that and point at the
On our end, or?
Yeah.
Gabby's end?
I think that you would have to do like the present mode. I tried to do like that on mine.
I think we're in
It's in present mode, yeah. I'm sharing the window.
Have it about as big as I can.
Can you minimize all the additional people who are online?
I wish I could. I couldn't without kicking them all out to my knowledge.
We can share these slides with the group too. I know that doesn't help us right now, but you can have access to these to go. Oh, do I have a touch screen?
Yeah, you do.
Oh.
There we go. That makes it visible. Thank you.
Okay. So the first major finding in that needs assessment that I'll speak to is how adult mental health in our community seems to be worsening over the years, and in particular in our vulnerable populations. So here on this slide, you can see the average number of poor mental health days that were experienced in a prior month amongst Summit County adults. It's been gradually increasing this average number of poor mental health days since 2017. So it went from 3.4 days on average to 4.4 days of poor mental health in 2021. This is a commonly used measure to assess status of mental well-being in a community, where we ask people to think about, on average, how many days of poor mental health were experienced in the prior month. So it's a commonly used measure, and typically we think of 8 or more poor mental health days being considered someone's experiencing mental distress. 14 or more poor mental health days in the past month would be considered frequent mental distress. So the 4.4 days on an individual level may or may not be significant for an individual, but what is notable is that that average number of poor mental health days experienced in the prior month is continuing to increase over the years.
One thing that I would just point out with this slide is that, as you can see at the bottom, it's a little bit funky the way that it's presenting, but these most recent data points are from 2020 and 2021, which, if you recall, there was some things going on during those years that really created an uptick in mental health challenges for folks. So we were in the middle of that global pandemic. And that was really a tough time for folks. So we are seeing, and some of the data will also show, that when the data comes out and there's hope as a community and national trends that are showing that that will start to come back down as we report and are able to report on the data from 2022, 2023, and then as recent as last year. This is also data that came from a bigger study. We have some more local studies that show a little bit better trends. I would also say that within this, it's important to know that a lot of times when you do work around stigma reduction and trying to promote people talking about mental health, there is an uptick and an increase in what people report as having hard times. So you'll notice that a lot of times the numbers look worse and get worse before they get better, because people feel better about communicating about their mental health. They can say, I feel badly, because it's not something that they feel like they need to hide or shutter kind of down anymore. They can openly speak about it because of that work that's been done for the stigma reduction, which Building Hope has done a lot of effort to bring that about in Summit County over the last several years. Just an awareness and it's okay to not be okay campaign around you can speak about your mental health, and that goal is to increase people's likelihood of talking about it and identifying that there's a problem, so then we can treat and help support people that are struggling.
Trying to understand the 3 lines.
Oh,
you
sure.
go back to the previous slide real quick. The bottom line is Summit County.
It is.
The middle
Correct.
line is Colorado, and the top line is United States.
That's correct.
So the way I interpret this is that Summit County is doing better than the state, and the state up until recognizes
Right.
this is 4-year-old data.
Right.
That the state was doing better than nationally until they came together at the end of during COVID.
That's correct.
All right.
And like Helen mentioned, we do have some more recent data, which is shown on this slide. This is showing the percentage of adults that are reporting 3 or more poor mental health days. This has increased over the last several years as well. So in 2020, the response to this question in our community engagement survey, 46% of adults reported having 3 or more poor mental health days. In 2024, last year, that increased to 55% of adult participants in that survey reported having 3 or more poor mental health days in the last month. So that was about a 10% increase across those 4 years. But notably, what's shown on this slide is those more vulnerable populations are low-income households, BIPOC individuals, LGBTQ plus folks, women and young adults are groups that are reporting higher rates of 3 or more poor mental health days as compared to that overall sample at that 55%. This is the screen we're sharing.
Yeah, pretty sure Sorry, I'll make it worse.
No worries, I got it.
I broke it.
It's okay. Well, I was just telling Kellen, this computer's a little finicky sometimes, so. It looks like I left Teams, so I might have to log back.
As soon as you come back, Maddie was my tech help, so I can at least focus on your presentation.
While you're doing that, do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure, no, please.
So you identified young adults as a, I forget the word you used.
Vulnerable
Population, thank you. Are older adults that are in the
Senior level.
I don't know what that age is, but is that also a vulnerable population?
So yes, it is a vulnerable population for us in terms of Summit County residents. But what we see and where we categorize vulnerable populations is sort of what the data presents and what national and state averages. The vulnerable populations for children, youth, young adult, that is kind of still where it rises to the top more so than our senior population. I would say that it might have to do with the vast number of those people that fall within those age ranges versus the senior population.
Gotcha, thank
you. I think we're back. Let's see. Okay, does that look okay, or I think that's all I can do on my end. Okay. Well, moving on to the next major trend that came out of our needs assessment, excessive alcohol use rates are high and really haven't changed much in Summit County in recent years. So we see here since 2017, the rates of binge or heavy drinking in Summit County has kind of hovered around 22%. And this is higher than state and national averages. Also kind of important to highlight, we find that our community's perceptions and beliefs about alcohol and drinking are important as it contributes to this number. So 80% of Summit County adults agree that for most people in this community, alcohol is important to social life. So 80% agreed with that statement on our 2024 survey. We also found that about 70% of adults reported in 2024 that their lives had negatively been impacted by substance use, either their own or someone else's. So this is a really notable finding. All of this data really shows that substance use rates and impacts are troubling and can be problematic for community members here in Summit. And this data has also helped contribute and inform some of Building Hope's marketing campaign work. We launched a campaign called Booze Less Summit. We have some fun Booze Less swag with us today for you all. And really the message behind this campaign is encouraging community members and visitors in our community to booze a little less and do a lot more. So be mindful about your alcohol consumption. We're not anti-drinking, but really encouraging folks to moderate and take a harm reduction approach to alcohol use, hopefully to impact and positively shift these substance use findings.
Sorry, another question. Were you able to, obviously Summit County's not doing so well in this category, right? Were you able to kind of align that with other resort communities? I'm just like thinking in my mind, like Outer Banks or Mackinac Island or other like communities like that may have a heavy party scene. Are we in line with them? Are we doing better than them? Or?
So we're part of the Cats Amsterdam network and the Cats Amsterdam Foundation, who they originally started with the Vail Resorts locations. And so there were several different mountain towns similar to ours. And so yes, correct. There are a lot of similar trends within the Cats Foundation network, which we do a lot of work with them around looking at what are other mountain resorts doing. Tahoe, Eagle County, us, there's a couple more in Vermont and California, Mammoth, yeah. So there's different pockets that we look at, and traditionally resort communities have a higher use of binge drinking and alcohol use. It's a shared issue and problem, and so that is something that we look at a lot. I would say Summit County is kind of right in the mix with them. We're not significantly higher or lower. We're just all sort of in that bucket of, we've got a drinking problem, right? And Summit County is no different than that. We are trying to shift the needle a little bit, again, with that Booze Less campaign and just some of the awareness to the culture here, and just having people recognize that just because we live in a resort community doesn't mean that we need to live as tourists or be just like that kind of vacation mentality, is sort of the language around it. I would say that it might not be the exact trend that we want it to be, but the fact that we've stayed consistent is better than bad. And it's actually a good thing that we've stayed consistent and that we're not necessarily significantly higher than the state averages and the US averages. So we are in that kind of crux point where we could do some serious work on it and make it better, but we also understand that it's a trend that we're right in line with our kind of partners.
Was there any data collected that would, looking at our demographic, looked at people who had been in Summit County, say, 1 year or less, versus people who are more committed to the county, have been here 3, 5, 10, 15 years?
Yeah, so we definitely have, with the CATS Amsterdam, they do some of the survey data that we're talking about here today is from a community survey that is done through the partnership with the CATS Amsterdam group. And so we do have a deep dive into that data. And yes, you can look at kind of years that people have been here, ages, connection to the community, seasonal employee versus full-time employee, all of those things, and really map out. And I would say that it's highest use when you're first here, and then it kind of levels off for when you're here for a little bit of time, and then it does go down as you are here for a longer period of time. But I would also say that the culture is inherent too. So folks that have been here, that's a part of their community, and that's a part of what all of our kind of big events and all of our social gatherings and things like that have a lot of alcohol in its foundation. So that's something that we're kind of looking at, is how to work within those structures. Yeah.
Is there a quick definition of what excessive use is?
Yeah.
So, yes, so excessive use, excessive drinking includes heavy and binge drinking. Heavy drinking is when someone consumes 8 or more drinks, a female consumes 8 or more drinks per week, and a male 15 or more drinks per week. And then binge drinking is 4 or more drinks on one occasion for a female and 5 or more drinks on occasion for a male. So excessive includes both of those types of drinking.
So by those definitions, it would appear, since you have such significant differences between males and females, I'm surprised you don't have one standard for excessive and then identify, you're basically saying if a male drinks 13 drinks a week, they're not excessive, but if a female drinks 8 a week, they're excessive.
And these aren't building hope determine excessive versus binge. These are the kind of points that are used nationally.
But that's what makes evaluation of this data difficult.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, treatment side, geography is looked at from a treatment side for alcoholism. In other words, do we have more treatment here in Summit County than, let's say, Eagle County or Lake Tahoe or whatever?
Sure, I think that we're doing a lot better than we were in the past. that's for certain. We have brought in a lot more treatment providers and programming, and that's a lot of what we are kind of identifying today too, that there's a lot of work that's been done, but there's more work that needs to be done still. One of the things that we are still struggling with as a community is that when you need a higher level of care, whether that's for substance use or mental health, there's not a ton of options here locally. So people have to go outside of the community to find that next level treatment. And a lot of reasons for that are because we have a limited number of people within our small community that are here that really need that higher level. So it's harder to maintain the programming because there's not always capacity, or they're not always at capacity, so programs can't sustain long enough to be here. They're also hard to staff at that lower capacity. And so we have done a lot of work to partner with Eagle County excuse me, to share resources so that we're not building all of the programs that each of our communities need that can't sustain individually. So we've worked with Eagle County to help them. Obviously, they're building they are building a pre-court healing center, which is an inpatient mental health treatment center, and that's going to be a 28-bed facility. It's actually fully built, and they're working on licensing, and they'll be accepting patients in May. So we have access to building and that resource. They also will have intensive outpatient programming, which will be a lot more accessible to our community residents just across the pass. It's not perfect because it's not right here, but it will be a lot more accessible than what we previously have had, which is Grand Junction or Steamboat or the Front Range. And then we're also working with them. They have brought over to Summit County an outpatient location that they have providers, outpatient providers doing treatment in Frisco. And then they also have an intensive outpatient program that's going to be run locally in Summit. So if somebody needs to go over there for treatment inpatient, meaning they will stay there for a couple of days, then they can come back to the community and receive a higher level of care. An intensive outpatient programming means you go to therapy and you see a treatment provider multiple times a week, and you have group focus for adolescents, you have family involvement, things like that. So it's more services than a traditional outpatient, which is usually just one touch point a week, if that. And so that's something that we've really helped to increase over the last couple of years. Previously, there was not a whole lot at all. We've also done a lot of work in this category around medication-assisted treatment, which is utilizing medications to help a person reduce cravings, withdrawal symptoms, things like that, and that will help increase their chances of continuing on with recovery treatment in general. So we previously didn't have any providers. Now the Care Clinic is a provider, as well as Porchlight Health, which is a new provider in the last couple of years. And then we also have MAT services in our jail too. So that's really exciting. So in comparison, I think to some of the other areas, Summit County is often looked at as a model community for treatment development and the work that we're doing as forward progress in terms of our mental health programming that we're bringing and our systems components. So Building Hope is oftentimes looked at and asked for resources and help supporting other communities build a similar type of programming, which is really exciting. So I would say we're at the forefront of what we should be doing. Thanks for bringing that up.
Why do you think that we are at the forefront? Is it because of the presence of healthcare that we have in the community with our hospital? Is it due to local government supporting this, or other organizations, or kind of everything?
Yeah, I would say that it's because our community is amazing, and our community really does a wonderful job of addressing a problem locally. And that's really where Building Hope started and came from, was there was a tragedy within the community with 13 suicides in 2016. And there was a group of stakeholders that all got together and said, we need to change this and create an organization and an entity that is going to lift up our behavioral health system and work on that. So Building Hope in its creation was started as a community function, and because of the tax initiative, Strong Future 1A ballot that was made in 2018, a lot of this work has been able to be possible due to those funding dollars. And so I would say, in large part, we're able to do it because our community is supportive of mental health and identifies that it relates to everything that we do here. And because of that, we've put, the community has put the money where the mouth is and taken care of each other, so.
And we'll get to more of that later on as well, but.
Yeah,
And
we
we're
have-
happy to just have discussion
well,
or.
We have about 10 minutes left.
Yeah, sure.
So
So if you don't-
use it, you're free to use it any way you'd like.
Just for the sake of kind of, I'm gonna
Yeah,
just
go
skip
for
into
it, yeah.
Kristen. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna skip some of the data, and just because we're gonna share these slides with you, and I'll just highlight some of the changes that have been made based on the data analysis, as well as, and this slide is gonna be way too small to see. Essentially, what you can see on your left-hand side, this is what our system looked like in 2021. Red, not great. Green, great. So you can see the progress that's been made between 2021, just in terms of color representation. We have much more programming and much more resources now in 2024 is on the right side. So those building blocks that are mostly green are showing you all of the different programs that have been created over the last couple of years. And that's our adult system. And then this is the visual for our adolescent system. So a lot of priority has been spent in our adolescent sector because that was identified as a huge need, especially during the 2020-2021 time period. There was a high focus. So some of the programs that have come from the Strong Future dollars, as well as some other towns and municipalities have also contributed funding through the nicotine taxes in their own budgets, which is also something that we would love for Keystone to consider in the future. As you guys look at your budget as a town, how you can support the mental health treatment and programming that's done through Building Hope. But essentially what we do is help support other organizations to make sure that they have the resources and the programming that can be done. Building Hope does not own or do all of the programming ourselves, but we help support the other organizations create programs and enhance their programs to make sure that all Summit County residents are taken care of. So you can see there's a lot of different programs that have been created over the last couple of years, specific for mental health, substance use, crisis response, and adolescent specific. And then where I would say that we are looking towards making major changes and progress in the next chapter, I would say, is within our children services. So we have a need in the young population. As I mentioned, we've focused on substance use, adult populations, and adolescent populations. And now we really need to enhance our children's services that are specific to those young kids, because those folks need help and support as well. And that goes into also the family systems. So these are our sources of where we've come from. Let's skip ahead a lot. Okay. So essentially, next steps. Recommendations. I'll kind of talk a little bit about this. So from the mental health improvement plan that we talked about, I mentioned at a high level, our next steps are to really look at our crisis system, as well as our system specifically enhancing resources for children and families. So right now, Building Hope is doing a lot of work when convening partners that have responses related to crisis support, as well as our children and families. And so right now, Building Hope and the county and our LTAC consultant are working together to bring those partners together. And we are looking at the potential to have a sort of crisis walk-in center that encompasses a lot of different resources for folks who are experiencing a mental health crisis and they need to go somewhere. Right now they're going to the emergency department, or they're calling the SMART team or the mobile crisis within Paragon Behavioral Health Connections. And so those are also resources that are coming together to say, what else do we need here? Withdrawal management is also being looked at because there's some changes at the state level. And so social detox, which is what we have classified here in Summit County, is changing the rules a little bit on what we have to have as a community. So we're looking for continued support for our endeavors in supporting the community, and we're also looking at that strong future funding. The next time that it is up for ballot is in 2028, and so we're working as a community to find out exactly what that looks like and make sure that the public understands how their funds and their tax dollars have been put to use in a really positive way that's been very impactful here in Summit. And then also being able to reignite that ballot initiative so that we can continue the work that's been done. Because unfortunately, mental health problems and challenges don't go away over time. They continue to be a need and people continue to struggle. And the challenges that exist within Summit County, high costs of living, childcare, housing, and the huge substance use issues that we have all result in a need of mental health support. So I think that's what I would just say right now, is that we've done a lot of work and there's more work to be done. So, awesome.
Any questions? Aaron.
Thank you for coming to present to us. I'm aware of some of the good works that you've done, and as always, good to be aware of the problems that are affecting our constituents, our community. And I know some people who have benefited from the services you have offered, so thank you for all that you do.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Kellen, again, thank you for coming today. We appreciate it. This is certainly information I don't think most of us have seen before, being new council members. So it's been helpful for us. And again, I'd like to echo Aaron's words. Thank you for what we do. I know the community needs the support very, very much. And it looks like you've been successful in the last 4 years.
Yeah, we like to think so, but definitely need to continue. So we appreciate you guys having us here. And if there's any other follow-up questions or anything that we can do, we'd be happy to speak again or to follow up.
Well, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Hannah Olson from Summit Fire and EMS. I've had an opportunity to work a little bit with Hannah on some issues some of our community members have had, and what I've been struck with, in fact, my own HOA, what I've been struck with is Hannah is a customer-oriented, has been very customer-oriented, looking at finding solutions to issues of not just a strict by rule implementation of the guidelines. I think is that a fair thing to say, Hannah?
Yeah, thanks.
So again, thank you very much, and over to you.
Awesome, thank you. Guys, I'm gonna try to, podium is tricky for me, so I'm gonna like kind of hang out in this area if that works, and hopefully the folks online can hear me well enough.
Wait, I'm still trying to get it, sorry.
You're gonna have to hold the,
I'm trying to get it into the chat, so hang on
Do we have a wireless mic?
There's that microphone.
Thanks everybody for your patience.
if you come closer, that microphone might be.
Don't let you fall.
Thank you guys so much, I'm sorry.
Yes.
I can get hold of
That
this.
one doesn't work.
Should be able to.
Okay, cool.
It is a wireless mic.
Yeah.
So I'm Hannah Olson. I work for Summit Fire and EMS's Wildland Division. There are 4 of us on the Wildland Division who are just committed to doing wildfire response, mitigation, prescription writing, helping to prepare and recover from wildfires in our community. Let's see, I started my job with Summit Fire and EMS 2.5 years ago, and before that I worked for the Forest Service for almost a decade on hotshot crews and helitack crews and sort of boots on the ground. And I also was a resident of West Hills and Keystone for like 5 years, and just last summer my husband and daughter and I moved to Silverthorne. So I know, we're officially Silverthorners now. I'm here too. Yeah, so I've had a couple of conversations with Lindsay about what wildfire mitigation could look like in a new town. Congratulations, it's so awesome. And I don't know, just I put this together to kind of share some of my thoughts. They're all based on mitigation best practices, but I'm thinking really carefully about like what this looks like in Keystone, where we have a bunch of mixed ownership parcels that are next to each other, Forest Service land, Vail Resorts land, HOAs, private, like a lot of opportunities and unique challenges. Wow, this is really small. Okay, the reason why we're talking about this at all is because we live in the West, and all of our ecosystems here are adapted to fire. This is tiny, but what this is,
Trying to zoom in.
a graph of fire resistance in plant species, and you guys can't necessarily see these species names, but like these ones that I've circled red are all the species that we have. So they're low on the fire resistance spectrum. For comparison, for you fire nerds out there, like a ponderosa pine that sees low intensity fire regularly is up here in this top right corner. Our species, Doug fir, lodgepole, subalpine fir, limber pine, Engelmann spruce, juniper are all down here, not very resistant to fire, and like burn kind of hot and spread quickly when we do have fire. That said, they're in these fire regimes that see fire quite infrequently, like every 35 to 200 years we see a fire in any one stand, and it ranges everywhere from low to stand replacing intensity. Our lodgepole pine forests love high intensity stand replacing fires. Our mixed conifer forests, the spruce fir, see low and moderate intensity fire. You're like, why are you telling me this? We live in these ecosystems, and so we have to like massage them a little bit in order to change the fire behavior in the communities that we live in. And as you guys probably know, when the Forest Service was founded 100 years ago, we started suppressing all wildfires, and we've had like 125 years now of a full fire suppression forest management plan in these ecosystems that are used to seeing fire at regular intervals. In addition to that, we have had beetle epidemics, like mistletoe, things that affect our stands, and we had the pine beetle epidemic, whatever, 15 years ago now. So we have this fuel loading that we need to do something with because it was ready to burn, and we are not tolerating burning in our ecosystems. And then on top of it all, we have like our homes and our recreation and our industries here. So that's setting the scene of the forest. Is that a surprise to anyone? Okay, cool. Next slide. So our best practices for managing our forests then, and when I'm talking about forests, I'm talking like not around your homes. I'm talking like out in the woods, away from structures. What we do is we mimic the disturbance that would have been here if we hadn't interfered in fire regimes. We're basically like thinning the stand to create heterogeneity in the stand, so age class diversity and species diversity. So comparing this photo, can you guys see this? Okay. you can get the gist, like clumps of different kinds of species that are spaced out from one another. You have young trees, you have old trees, conifers, deciduous. What this sort of thinned and managed stand does is it fares better. Well, it fares better in a changing climate because it has more diversity. That means that not all of the stand is vulnerable to any one disturbance at any one time. And it's generally more resistant to injury and illness. Next slide, please. Again, just to like drive this one home, our research about forest management. Okay, so here we have pre-wildfire, during a wildfire, and post-wildfire. This top row is untreated. So thick sand, it burns really hot, gets up into the canopies, a lot of tree mortality, and we're left with this high mortality sand. When we just thin, we have some high intensity fires, some low intensity fire, and mixed mortality. If we do prescribed burning, right, fire on the landscape, some mixed intensity, it's better than thinning only, but the best option for us by the research is thinning and then burning after we thin. So this photo on the left, does anyone recognize that burn scar? It's a local burn scar.
Keystone Gold?
No,
Wilderness.
no,
That's on Tenderfoot, isn't it?
ptarmigan.
Ptarmigan.
Yeah. So this is a great example of the sort of fire effects we see in an untreated forest, like really high intensity, really high mortality. We're getting great regeneration, but this stand probably isn't going to come back as the same stand that it was before because that fire was so far out of that forest's historic range of variability. Okay. So that's what we do out in the woods. What do we do around homes? And Gretchen can probably like teach this section because we've done a lot of work in her neighborhood. What we do is manage the woody fuels in the first 100-ish feet around structures. You do this sort of tapered approach so that as a fire is approaching a structure, it's sort of getting the steam knocked out of it because there's less and less stuff to burn as we get closer to the structure. And we make sure that our structures are built out of materials that are fire resistant, like Class A roofs, siding that's fire resistant. We don't have vinyl gutters. We don't have wooden decks that have a bunch of junk under them. So this combination of woody fuels removal in this tapered fashion and home hardening measures is what we know saves homes. Ask Lindsay Hirsch all about codes regarding home hardening stuff. There's luckily a ton of overlap with like our best building practices and the materials that are defensible in a wildfire. Okay, so how we're doing this in Summit County. At the smallest scale, we come and meet with homeowners and they do the work themselves. They say like, no, I can run a leaf blower, I'll take care of my yard. People take initiative themselves to protect their own structures. The next level up is at like an HOA level where the Open Space Committee of the HOA bands together to make a plan to do mitigation work, and they either do it on a community work day, or if it's a little bit above their skill level, like there's tree felling involved, then they hire contractors to do that work. At a county level, the county, through those 1A dollars, offers a grant that funds hazardous fuels reduction work. So we give out a bunch of money a year to private landowners and HOAs who want to hire a contractor to do this mitigation work on their properties. That's what's happening here. This is actually over in Settlers Creek. contractor craning out all this material from behind the Settlers Creek condos. And then, I don't know, at the biggest scale, we have the towns managing their open space parcels, the county managing their open space parcels, and the Forest Service doing hazardous fuels reduction on their land too. And that oftentimes results in pile burning operations that check some of those beneficial traits of prescribed fire, but we generally in Summit County have a low tolerance for like broadcast burning prescribed fire, though our first prescribed fire in like 25 years in Summit County was over above the shooting range last year, if you guys recall that.
Yes.
Okay, next. Okay, so as I've been like dreaming about my big mitigation plans for Keystone, like in Hannah's dream world, how we apply this in Keystone, the two sort of lowest hanging fruit or most bang for our buck locations where I feel like, ooh, I'm a little bit kept up at night by this East Keystone, so orienting us, here's north. We're here in this building. Here's Montezuma Road where it splits off from Highway 6. Is anyone not oriented on this map? Okay, so area to look at, number one, is far East Keystone, Settlers Creek, Ski Tip area. The second is where we are right now, like Central Keystone, and particularly along this north edge that butts up against Forest Service land. So, big picture map, we're about to go down to small maps of both of these parcels. So East Keystone, this is really cool. Like, we have a handful of HOAs over in this part of the county that have done a ton of really, really good work. Namely, the Estates of the Alders. The Settlers Creek HOA is hot on their tail for this year to do some mitigation work. And County Open Space treated this parcel that I think belongs to you guys now. Durkam's Dash, it's on their radar, and the same with the Ski Tip Ranch HOA. So green is where work has already been done, yellow is mitigation plan in progress, and red is like nothing's happened yet, and it should. So these red parcels are Vail Resorts owned, and then this little sliver, weird sliver, are two like private parcels. This just feels like so critical for me in terms of ingress, egress, particularly for Montezuma folks. Like if we need to evacuate, this corridor needs to be really, really bomb-proof. And this would be a really incredible cross-boundary project to have all of these parcels linked together. As you guys know, like wildfire doesn't respect boundary lines. So in a neighborhood like this where we have all this mixed ownership land, it's so important that we collaborate and work together. Okay, next one. All right, orienting us. Here's Highway 6 cutting through the middle. We're here in this yellow parcel, sort of at the top. We've got Cabins in the Pines, Quicksilver and Tennis Club townhomes have plans. St. John is represented in the room. They've got mitigation plans. And the red again is Vail Resorts. I don't necessarily need to call them out, but there's meaningful work to do on their properties that are sort of infilled in the Keystone community. And then unknown fate for this parcel, or you guys know more than I do, but like mitigation work to do on this piece of land certainly as well. And that would be building off of the mitigation work that the Forest Service has done upslope of us on Tenderfoot. All right, so that's it for my presentation. Those are my ideas, you guys. Any questions, concerns, revelations, opportunities? Yeah, Carol.
Hi, thanks for doing this. This is exciting / terrifying. Are you in discussion with Valley Resorts? Don't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah, I've had a conversation with their mountain ops manager. I'm not sure what the exact title is, but mountain ops, director of mountain ops, there we go. And they, let's see, I met with them in December. They were like, let's do it.
Oh, that's a positive first step.
It's
right.
such a positive first
It's just
step,
the first
and I'm
step.
feeling I'm feeling hopeful. We went into the holidays in like radio silence as expected, and like it's February, like wildfires not probably on their minds in the slightest. I don't know, I feel like I'm worried that it's gonna fall through at Broomfield level, but I don't know, that's just speculative. I have started conversations and that was just me totally like cold calling them, being like, here's what I'm seeing as the person who will be responding to fires here, defending the properties of our residents, like, can we get something going? And they were super receptive, but.
Okay,
that was
perhaps this is something we can put on the list of things we keep coming back to in our conversations
Yeah.
with the resort.
Yeah,
So they can understand our shared concern. But I would like to hear if you have any recommendations for what what can we do with respect to policies that we can enact that will create more safety on a macro level. And I'm going to start with
yeah,
a small anecdote. So, you know, when they come up, they ask you to, I don't even know who this is, I think it's the county, they ask you, put all your wood out front and we'll collect it.
yeah,
Well, if I do that and no one around me does it, and I can see piles of dead, dry stuff, I don't know what to do as a homeowner.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that's what you should tell us, but if you can give us some hints of things that would be within our purview as legislators to say, this is what we expect.
yeah, I mean, whatever, let's see, I can say like wildland urban interface regulations are arriving to Colorado from a state level sooner than later, like July being enforced in December. And so whatever we can do to get ahead of, whatever we can require of people in terms of wildfire mitigation, be that through a code avenue or other, gets us ahead of the curve.
I guess what Carol's looking for is what would you recommend we do from a policy standpoint? And I guess we don't need to put you on the spot to answer that today because it's a very multifaceted
Yeah, I know, I need
question for you.
a menu.
You know how to find us,
Yeah.
and we are interested in
Well,
hearing.
what I'd like you to do though is work with the town manager
Yeah,
and give him the information of what you think we should do to best protect our community.
yeah,
Is that something you could?
yeah,
work
for
with her on?
sure.
John, could you work with her on that?
We'll just need to collaborate on that, John. Like, I'm a fire practitioner, and so I don't know necessarily what the tools are that would be the best entry points, and so,
So let me give you an
Yeah.
example.
Yeah.
Maybe an extreme example. The town could legislate a requirement for all properties in the town to be fully fire mitigated to your standards.
I would love, that's my dream. That's a,
Yeah, but, I mean, that's
That's a
one.
good
You have to explain to us what that standard is so we can work with that.
You work with it, but that's one extreme. There's
Yeah.
other areas, and I guess what we need is, where's the right middle ground?
Yeah.
The council is gonna start working on wildfire mitigation or wildfire mitigation potential ordinance, probably classed in the nuisance ordinance category.
yeah,
Sometime in the next month or so, as we work through a few others. So this is a good time for us to look at this, and then we have to balance the impact on our residents as we go through that.
yeah.
Uh,
I think we can come up with, I mean, we can come up with a mitigation spec for the community that doesn't feel too heavy-handed and still accomplishes our wildfire mitigation goals, I think.
Yeah, and I've seen you do that sort of thing, working with individual HOAs, working with individual homeowners. So I know it's within your strengths to be able to address something. And I think we could potentially set a pace in Summit County in this area from a town standpoint looking at it.
That'd be so awesome. Yeah.
Dan and Gretchen, then.
Okay, just a comment, I live in the Alders, we did use the program from the county.
Yeah.
Very successful, and then we used the output for insurance.
Yeah.
So I just wanted, when you do work with John, I think that we always do need to worry about what the cost, I mean.
For sure.
Burning your house means you don't put a cost on that. But there is value in this. We do believe that it helped with our insurance
Yes.
rates this year because of the work we did last year.
Yep.
In the owners. Now, I agree with you that Settlers Creek and some of the others are right next door.
Yep.
They have not progressed like we have. But when you do talk to John, I think show both sides of that balance sheet.
Yep.
And Alders is probably the leading HOA in Keystone in wildfire mitigation. They started every Terry Starzl
Yeah.
years ago.
Absolutely.
It's been built on every year. But we are seeing the impacts, and I'll just mention, it was in that zone, one of the zones you mentioned, St. John just next door.
Yeah.
They got dropped by the insurance company this last year.
Yeah.
No, if I may interject, since I live there, we were going to be dropped, and we put up enough noise. Also, they gave us 3 weeks to find another insurer. And when I jumped up and down like a gorilla, they turned around, went back to farmers, gave us a year to find another insurer. But obviously, finding another insurer is going to be quite a drill. In fact, Hannah recommended a new insurance group, et cetera, that are going to start looking at actually fire mitigation on your property rather than just a flyover or some kind of an AI-driven program, which has very little validity, but unfortunately lends guidance to the insurance companies. They don't put boots on the ground. So anyway, we were lucky to get, again, our insurance renewed. That won't happen again. So we have some things to do from a mitigation standpoint, I suppose. And part of the problem, as I said, was you can do the work and they're just not going to, how do we say, take a look at it. It will not be part of their decision-making, unfortunately. So it's just a very scary prospect. And also the thing that I look at as well is the idea that, again, this funding is coming through and does come through to Summit County. Is that in any jeopardy, do you think? In other words, is it a trickle down from the federal side? Because it is not. Okay.
Yeah, strong
Where
futures.
does that money come from?
It's strong futures fund money.
Yeah.
What's that?
Strong futures fund money.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's county tax dollars.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a set aside.
Yeah.
Good.
But I mean, insurance is a real and massive problem right now.
Yeah,
And
it's a huge problem because the companies that evaluate the risk are doing very much like the gentleman indicated.
Yeah.
In the flyover, and it's a very broad brush look.
Yep.
And everything is tarred at the same level, and it's something that needs to be addressed at the state level to, I think, probably be able to finally address that issue.
yeah, I mean, what I'm experiencing out there in the world, working with different communities and HOAs who are in different statuses with their insurance coverage, is like, if from my perspective as a wildfire responder, like if we're reducing the wildfire risk, that's great. If it's not going to hurt your insurance at worst. At best, it's going to maybe get your premium reduced or at least not increased, or help you keep your insurance.
We did get a document too from the fire folks.
Yeah.
We then made a big play with the insurance.
Yes. You
Yeah,
kind of
I
have to
say
like,
also that actually Hannah came over and did a survey of our property, and I think it helped very much with the insurance company. Again, I don't think they were going to, again, re-up us, if you will, but this time they did because we made a lot of noise, and I think you're.
yeah.
I think you're.
So I've also worked with homeowners who have done mitigation work and brought it to their insurance company and said like, look, here's before and after, and it's bought them nothing. My hope is that the insurance situation is so evolving that will change them, and that insurance companies will start to assess actual risk rather than the sort of model that they're looking at from their computer in Bermuda, but that's not where we're at right now.
I think unfortunately, if we're looking at our policies, we're gonna have to look at them from the standpoint of what do we need for community safety and preservation of property.
Yeah.
And if you can get some insurance benefits out of that, it's gonna be positive.
Yes.
But if we pitch this as, this is gonna help your insurance, I think we're gonna have a lot of disappointed folks.
Yeah.
I think you're.
But, let me move around. Gretchen?
I'm not going to ask a question. I just want to reiterate what a resource the fire department in general, and Hannah, I've worked with her, and having a fire mitigation plan and is really important. We didn't have one a year ago. We have one now. But also, as the mayor mentioned, the fire department has really helped to make us aware of, at the HOA level, things that we need to do for safety.
Mm-hmm.
For example, propping doors open on a multifamily building. So what I would do, I would encourage anyone, get on the phone. I talk to the fire, I will call up and ask the dumbest question available and get an answer. And I think, what did we spend, like 2 hours one day? And we got to some of our buildings that were sided in shake, and she's like, oh my God. Well, but it can't all be done at one time, but you've got, you got to take a little piece of the apple at a time.
Yeah. Thanks, Gretchen.
One point, and I was going to bring it up during the reports for Coffee with Council, but one of the folks from the Antlers Gulch neighborhood in particular was really asking us a lot of questions about Firewise community designation and what that could possibly do for our community. They were talking about insurance, of course, but I guess, do you know about the Firewise program? Could you comment on if that would be something to potentially look at for our community? And then I have a second question.
Okay, let's see. Firewise is awesome. It's a designation, but also a set of guidelines. So at the very least, we should be following Firewise guidelines throughout the community. Keystone could not be get Firewise designation because we have too many dwelling units. I think they cap out around 4,000. So we could have like neighborhoods get Firewise designation, but not all of Keystone. That'd be really cool. I like Firewise. The premise of Firewise is that you're like banding together with your neighbors in your immediate community to come up with a plan and do work year over year to reduce your wildfire risk. You make a plan, like year 1, you do your immediate zone. Year 2, you do your yard work. Year 3, it's really incremental. And the point of it is like to keep engaged in an effort over time. And that's a great fit for some communities. I think where Keystone is as a fledgling town, you have like more powerful leverage points to get work done. Through what John and the mayor was talking about, like, are there code or like formal directives that would be more powerful?
Gotcha, thank you.
Yeah.
And John, just as a side note, I had a discussion with the farmers insurance agent that largely services that largely services all of Keystone.
Used to.
Well, but he largely services most of them still. Anything over 50 million got dropped, and they weren't given they got the same notice, but there was no reprieve for them, so. But what he told me was Firewise isn't even considered up here for insurance rates. It's only the evaluators doing the high flyby and the overall assessments.
Okay, understood, thank you. My second question, a lot of the maps you were showing us, specifically for Central and then those East Keystone areas, identified parcels that seemed to butt right up to the U.S. Forest Service or other public land. What work are they doing? Because it's, for lack of a better way to say this, it's nice to say that we need to do work here, right? But 100 feet past the end of that boundary, right, is the Forest Service land, so the forest fire isn't going to respect that boundary as well.
Sure.
What are they doing possibly in conjunction with the efforts that we could advocate for?
Yeah, really, really good question. They're doing a lot, but at like mock turtle, like that like government pace, you know? And I mean that like they're doing the very best they can, strategically choosing parcels that are going to get the most bang for their buck in terms of defending life and property. Like, will you go to slide 9?
Sure.
Like, right, they treated this whole south-facing hillside up above the building that we're in right now. That'll come back up for retreatment in about a decade. Okay, sorry, Gabby, go back to 8.
I'm here for it.
Over here in your neighborhood, like, this is all, like, this is just like a wall of timber, right? I think this is, it's protected habitat for some.
Jones Gulch. It's Jones Gulch in that
Jones
area.
Gulch.
Yeah,
What's the
and
protected species in there?
The hare. No, the hare.
The hare.
Snowshoe hare.
Well, the
This-
lynx.
Lynx, that's what, yeah, lynx.
They're doing it.
Yes.
It's
The
protected.
lynx eat the hare, we don't touch that part of the forest is what I'm getting at, really. And so we can, I'm also trying to parallel like my focus areas with where the Forest Service is doing work, and if we can get a bigger cross-boundary project going, all the better. I will also say, like, per my first slide about fire ecology here, like, we need to think about houses burning down as the emergency, not wildfires as the emergency. So that is to say that, like, if we have a fire out here and we've done really, really great mitigation work around the values at risk, and we can get some ecological benefit from letting a fire burn on Forest Service land and do its ecological job, and we are not worried about protecting these neighborhoods because we know that we've made them bomber in our mitigation work, like, that in my mind is our best case scenario outcome.
So when there's like hypothetically there's
Yeah.
a fire right down that area you talked about, the
Yeah.
incident commander or whatever the technical term
Yeah.
is, will have a conversation, look at that and be like, these houses are bomb-proof, we have really no risk to property or life, let's just let it burn.
Yeah.
And then alternatively, these properties are not bomb-proof, we could have a significant risk to property and life, we need to fight this.
Yeah.
And so those are the two decision points.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It depends also on the time of year and how many resources are available nationally, blah, 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 blah. But,
I'm going to say, Aaron, last question.
yeah,
Yeah, and just adding on to that endpoint, obviously, the wind direction and the terrain to fight in is a big problem, and that's steep, north-facing terrain. And folks need to remember, if you start clear-cutting steep north-facing terrain, you start to introduce avalanche hazards where there weren't before, which we saw on Small Mountain Road. And I just want to jump back to the whole view from the insurance companies when they do that brief flyby, like 30,000-foot view of our community. I think having a strong community standard that the town can set in the name of public safety
yeah,
also is the most likely to be able to be noticed by the actuaries who don't want to actually spend very much time looking in a granular sense.
yeah. I think that'd be incredibly powerful.
So Hannah, again, Again, thank you very much for coming today. I think this was useful for the council. I think there's some more stuff we ought to be looking at as well, particularly with Forest Service.
Yeah.
In our boundaries as we go forward. I'd like to chat with you a little bit later about some areas that you didn't have necessarily concern about and understand why. But again, thank you very much for coming. Very useful for us.
Thank you all. I put a little stack of my cards over there on the name tag table, so feel free to reach out. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you so much.
Again, next item is discussion of wildlife-proof refuse containers, and I'll turn it over to the town manager.
Okay, we discussed this at our last work session. Still had a few details to work out. I've proposed some changes. Those are in bold language, and we'll go through the draft ordinance piece by piece, addressing those things in particular. I just realized minutes ago, I don't know why it popped into my head, but I totally ignored an entire class of refuse containers in this. And that's, I guess I want to call them public use refuse containers. Garbage cans out at swimming pools in an HOA or in the River Run Plaza, those types of issues. Most of those already are in bear-proof, wildlife-proof containers, but we should, before I bring the ordinance up, I will add a section detailing those specific types of refuse containers.
Yeah, I just assumed they were in the other category, but yeah, fair to call them out so everyone knows.
Yeah. So we'll go through some of the changes I made and talk about those. If you see changes I didn't make that you want made, let's jump out, but we'll just start right away with definitions. And I specifically defined what a dumpster is. That's a single refuse container greater than 1 cubic yard in volume. I had to call this out because there are a cubic yard is approximately 200 square feet. I believe, I looked that up. That can't be right.
What is right?
9 by 9 by 9 is about 700 cubic feet. And it's 81, it occupies 81 square feet of space.
9 by 9 by 9. Yep. So that's what I saw. Regardless, they make dumpsters at 1 cubic yard. That's the smallest dumpster I could find. They do make some multiple wildlife-resistant refuse containers that hold more than a cubic yard, but they don't hold them in one single individual container. So just to make it clear that that type of thing is acceptable, doesn't have to be in an enclosure. If you have a real dumpster, it has to be in an enclosure. I redefined dumpster enclosures to include a roof, and redefine the instead of just self-latching, I defined latching with a little bit more detail, and I took out the self-closing because that just got a little bit confusing on how it would work, what it would do. We do have a requirement that the doors be closed. So I don't know if that's an issue, taking out the self-closing personal doors.
I still would love to see something in there about it. I mean, I get where there's some confusion around it, but there should be some encouragement to set up that nudge so that the doors return to the state that you want.
I guess another reason I took it out was because to have a self-closing door, the latching mechanism would not necessarily be a wildlife bear-resistant latching mechanism. And I kind of felt it was more important to have a wildlife latching mechanism. If you just have a spring closing the door, it'll just, the self-latching thing won't fit.
I can see that point.
My only concern, and I don't think that whether we legislate it or not, is people actually closing the door or not. You can put up all the signs you want at your HOA dumpster about closing the door behind you, and not everyone's gonna do that, so whether we put it in the article or not, I think that it's something we can't always do 100% compliance.
Yeah, I think the point that says the door has to be closed when not in use covers it. That's gonna drive the HOAs to do things exactly what your objective is. And if there becomes a problem, then we have the mechanism to go in and deal with that particular problem versus legislating something that's maybe confusing. John?
Okay, so I did not make any more changes until we come down to section D. And as I'm looking, I put commercial properties, but I can take those out because we specifically define commercial properties later how they work. But basically, section D and E talk about multifamily housing developments and clustered residential housing, HOAs that have central dumpsters, basically. And I got rid of the option for a wildlife-proof refuse container, wildlife-proof dumpsters, and require all multi-use, all HOAs that have central location to have a enclosed dumpster, a dumpster enclosure. I'll get down to the dates that these have to take place later, but there's still options for them until they can get the dumpster enclosures built to use wildlife-proof dumpsters.
So just ask a question. I mean, I apologize for not being here. Why is a wildlife-proof refuse container not good?
Well, most of our HOAs at this point, most of our properties require a dumpster enclosure anyways. So this was kind of just taking that step to this point. If we're going to do a dumpster, I don't know. It's up to you guys. If we want to use a regular enclosure with a wildlife-proof dumpster, I can change that back. But I got some feedback from the council, and actually from outside the council, saying they think we need just enclosures entirely, wildlife-proof enclosures.
I would say that there's two reasons to think about here, maybe three. One, an enclosure is far easier. The interlocks on that make it wildlife proof are far easier for people to use, especially guests who aren't familiar with them, than the heavier latching systems that are built into the dumpsters, which has some side benefits, especially around noise. And then three, we could argue that certainly as far as appearances and property values, an enclosure is definitely a nicer look for our community.
And it discourages ninja dropping of your garbage. People will still drop it outside the enclosure, but I think people are much more likely to just drop their garbage bags beside a dumpster than outside an enclosure.
It's the broken window on a parked car theory.
Carol?
John, did you say that you took out echo, or that's still there?
Echo?
This next paragraph? Or are you still talking about commercial properties and multifamily housing?
Yeah, no, I'm saying I can just, the term commercial properties,
Okay.
it applies, the same rules apply commercial and residential, but we have a whole different section a little farther down talking about commercial.
I just wanted to get into your head when you talk about some of these developments that, quote, cannot construct a dumpster enclosure. You probably had something in mind, and I wondered, physically impossible?
Yeah, there might be situations where it is physically impossible. The property was laid out before there was a requirement for an enclosure. They have room for a dumpster, but not room for an enclosure, or issues like that. I don't think there are many, I just don't want to create a situation where we have a law that for some reason or another can't necessarily be met with without reconstructing the building in some way.
Sure, that makes sense, and I just want to make sure that you're not in a position of having to constantly adjudicate these things, because that's the point of the policy.
Oh, yeah.
But I think this makes sense, thank you.
It also gives you the option to, if there is a particular entity that has to build an enclosure that doesn't currently have one, to give them a temporary solution until they get the enclosure built.
Yeah, for instance, the Keystone Center.
Good example.
I can think of 3 examples in this community where there are issues.
Yeah.
So if I'm reading this correct, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if an HOA or a property has currently a dumpster for trash, and then 10 little wheelie bins for recycling containers, all of those could be stuck into a enclosure, and that would meet, as long as the enclosure meets the standards, that would meet the requirements, right? So even though the wheelie bins aren't dumpsters, they still can be used for commercial properties.
Yes, they can, as long as they're
Inside.
inside an enclosure.
Thank you.
Or, yes.
I just want to reemphasize again, if you want to drive people to do the right action of having the trash end up inside a bear-proof thing, make it easy for them, and that is opening a door into a structure. The door, it's really easy to make an easy to operate bear-proof door to the outside. It can be as simple as a twist handle door. And then people go inside and put their trash in there. But if you have a hard to operate, heavy topped dumpster, people are gonna be like, what's this? It's a dumpster and my trash goes next to it. And then we've not solved our problem, but have induced people to spend money on a solution that isn't working.
John, go ahead.
So this would, the way this is rewritten, getting rid of the wildlife dumpsters, this will be a financial issue for some properties. There's no doubt about it, but I think it's definitely for the better of Keystone overall. Next section, maintenance and operation. I took out the all enclosures defined in this chapter shall have self-closing doors and latching devices. As I mentioned earlier, there's hard to do self-latching wildlife proof. They are out there, but many of them would just prefer maybe to have a simple slide lock or issues like that. We do have the requirement that all enclosures shall keep all doors closed and latched at all times when the enclosure is not being actively accessed. So I also took out the doors and latching devices. Some of our larger HOAs, commercial developments, actually have garage door access to their dumpsters or compactors, and that would be a real serious burden to have self-closing garage doors. Scroll down, next changes are commercial refuse disposal. This is what I was talking about earlier. As I was working through, I added commercial to multifamilies and then ran across the entire section down here. So this is basically mimics the rule. We're requiring them to have dumpster enclosures. If there's an issue with that, if it's an impossibility for some reason, come talk to the town manager and we'll see if it's truly an impossibility. If you can't have an enclosure, you have to have a wildlife-proof dumpster. Called out that it's an administrative penalty for this. It allows easier posting and notification. We don't have to actually truly make sure they get it, we have to put it in a space where they will see it. And then, our very last paragraph, and we're flying through this, I did not expect this to go this quick. This might hold us up a little bit. Containers, I call for conformance by August 15th of this year. That was previously April 15th. And enclosures, I pushed the date back to August 15th of 2026. If you don't have the enclosure complete by August 15th of this year, you will need to get a wildlife-proof container until you get the enclosure completed. Those are the changes I made there. So I think I'll make that language a little more clear, that as of August 15th, you must have a completed enclosure or a temporary wildlife-proof container.
Carol?
And I just wanted to remind us that the discussion 2 weeks ago was that that 2026 date was designed to enable HOAs and commercial businesses to actually budget for that, which they may not have done at this point, not seeing it coming.
Yeah, the last time that we reviewed this, I expressed concerns about HOAs meeting timelines, commercial businesses meeting the timelines, and any concerns they may have. Since then, I forwarded the previous draft out to Keystone Owners Association for consideration. I talked to them again last weekend at their board meeting, and I have had absolutely zero comments back from Vail Resorts, zero comments back from the commercial businesses, some of them having restaurants that we've received. We did receive the comments back from Keystone Neighborhood Company, which John worked with. So all the objections that I had about implementation, since I've received no comments back or concerns expressed from those organizations that I sent it to, I've removed any concerns on the implementation. I think the 2025, you have to at least have a bear-proof container, and 26 for an enclosure I think that's very reasonable. Aaron?
Obviously, my advocacy is for now, sooner, because that's a safer community, that's better respect for our environment. But I'm a pragmatist, and I think these modifications are reasonable, understandable, achievable, and built in such a way that with the leeway and the notice given, there won't be very much room for anyone to come back and say, well, we couldn't do it in that, over a year of notice, a year and a half. And I think that this is going to be a good thing for the community.
One thing you didn't cover, John, was the section above on the fines and other items. Am I correct that it was on the top of page 5? Am I correct that your thought on that is that would be covered via resolution, like all the other nuisance stuff as we go forward, and that the third violation, you could simply would be a valid thing to keep in here that says, hey, you get a third violation, it's going to require a mandatory appearance in court, but the rest would all be covered in a resolution that would be passed by council?
Yes. I'll have that language when I bring this to the ordinance.
Very briefly, first, I'd like to thank Mr. Mayor for his outreach to the community, because that judge precisely would have asked other communities who have implemented this, what would you have done differently? That's what they would have done differently, is more pre-outreach, so that there was understanding and room for feedback. And then just one quick thought, I do remember a piece of advice I also got was, be specific about how enclosed the structure needs to be with a roof. because some currently exist that have fairly large gaps that might keep out a fully grown bear, but maybe not a juvenile, or maybe not a raccoon, which we have raccoons, or crows, etc.
I love all the adjustments that were made for this. One just suggestion, in reading the compliance and the dates, it was not overtly clear to me that all containers need to be in compliance by August 15th of this year. I took it as residential containers of this year, and then any commercial properties that are working on the dumpster or larger enclosures would be next year. And now that I read it over with a fine tooth comb, I'm seeing that, but maybe just for simplicity purposes, it might be good to just spell out a little bit better and less legalese for folks that are doing that.
I agree completely. I just need to make it, even if you plan on, if your final solution is the enclosure, if you can't get there by August 15th this year, I'll make that very clear.
Thank you. And then,
Cool, do you have something else?
I do, if you had a quick point on that.
Just not on the real question I had was, would it be beneficial on the enclosure issue particularly, just to require a sign off by the community development staff?
Yes, I have in there that all enclosures are, this is a dumpster enclosures are subject to all planning and zoning requirements and building codes. So,
So it's 120 square feet requires.
120 square feet does not require it.
Yeah.
So.
But if it's less than that, it doesn't.
Yeah, more than that it does. So I think what we need to actually do is, and I think it should go into the zoning code, is the specific design standards for enclosures, dumpster enclosures.
And then.
Because the zoning code has all the requirements for getting a permit, getting permission, issues like that, rather than trying to rewrite all of that into this ordinance also.
Question would be, is one commercial property with multiple dumpsters in multiple locations going to cumulatively add up their space for that 120 limit?
Well,
Viability.
yeah, and my hope is that we get rid of that limit, at least for planning purposes. For building purposes, it would still be okay, but for planning and design purposes, we'll redo our code to require all dumpster enclosures to.
Okay.
So as you mentioned, there's obviously financial consideration for this. There's going to be costs incurred by certain either residential units or commercial units or businesses, fair organizers, operators within town. I would like to see the appetite for us to offer a one-time grant program on supporting to cover some of these costs, not all of the costs, but some of these costs, fixed at a certain amount, right? I think that us legislating a cost for a lot of our community, spend your money, but we're not going to put our money where our mouth is type of thing, isn't going to go over well with some people, and I think it'd go a long way if we could at least offer a small incentive or support in that. I brainstormed a little bit, right, cover half of the cost up to X amount of dollars of like a, I'm just.
Can we start with an understanding of what are the range of costs for individual households for one of these containers?
So I looked at it myself, right, and I will be put on the residential hat here, like potential conflict, right? I would have to get a new bin, right? So I looked into the cost myself, and you're looking at several $100s, so $400 roughly dollars in that cost. If you're looking for the one that you're talked about many councils ago with the self-latching. If you're talking about a container for a dumpster, right, that's some thousands of dollars, but I think the residential ones are gonna be in the roughly $400 range.
Carol?
No, that was my question.
You want to know about the overall cost? We haven't really done a financial impact.
Oh, you mean the overall cost if we do that? Yes, I think, well, we have to start with understanding what are we legislating here? We're legislating that Keystone town members have to go out and spend $400 to meet the policy. Anybody can believe that this is a good thing, but choke at that.
But
So,
I don't think HOA is right. We're not, say there's 1,000 members in HOA. We're not saying it should be 400 times 1,000.
No, that's, I was talking individual.
Yeah.
Frankly, I am not worried about HOAs or commercial businesses. What I'm worried, because we're talking a dumpster like the one installed at Irishman, today's dollars is probably 50 to 75,000. All right. What I'm concerned about is individual residents, and that's where the biggie is. I would be more than happy to consider something for individual residents. For the others, the cost could be prohibitive on our standpoint, and particularly if it's a commercial entity, that's going to be their cost of doing business as they go forward. And since I received absolutely zero feedback from the Keystone Owners Association on it, I have to assume they don't have any concern with implementation as it was proposed. And so consequently, my focus is on the residents.
So,
Aaron?
I completely agree with the mayor, and I think that Councilmember Hagenow is a great idea here. I'd support some sort of grant-based offset, because you have these situations where it's kind of like, well, who's going to pay for it, particularly in some of the rentals? I mean, it makes sense, like, if you own your property, you're going to buy a bin, but like, does the landlord have to buy the bin, or does the renter end up paying $400 for a trash bin, and then they move into an apartment, and like, what are they going to do with that? Offsetting that, I think, would be a good use of community funds here, and I'm sure we could look at a range of operating all of what those numbers might be. Not everyone's going to need one, right? Because some people are just going to keep their bin in their garage and only put it out within the prescribed hours. Some people, like me, already have a bin, so I would need it. But I think especially when you start looking at workforce and folks who are on a tight budget, what the town could do to help them do what's best for the community here is a wonderful use of our funds.
Can I recommend that and see if the council would agree with this, that we ask the town staff to go out and come back with the recommendations for a grant program to support implementation of this. We would not have to hold up approval of this ordinance for that, but we could then look at that grant program as a supplement. Can I get a thumbs up on that?
yes. Great idea. Great. And definitely encourage compliance.
Any other questions and concerns on the Bear Proof ordinance? I commend the staff on the work that they've done. And for those of you who think that the staff and I are cahoots at times as we go through this, we actually weren't in this case as they went forward. So again, I think they did a very good job of bringing everything together. So with that, you got your direction. We'll see the first draft, the first reading of the ordinance at the next council meeting. And the next item of business is email retention policy.
And our town clerk, Madeline Seeley, will take this.
Yeah. And where the town manager thought the other one was going to be longer, I personally believe this one will be longer.
I will be right back.
All right, good evening, Mayor, Town Council. My name is Maddie Seal, I'm the town clerk. So I will provide kind of an overview of the proposed policy that I put together. This is just based off of some standards and policies that other towns have put together, and we can kind of take it from there and get any feedback on the proposed policy and what changes might need to be made. So the Colorado Open Records Act requires that public entities subject to CORA maintain an electronic mail communication system, adopt a written policy regarding this. So this policy is going to meet that standard under the statute, and additionally, this can be viewed with the CORA policy that we adopted in January, as well as the municipal records retention schedule. So some of the key points outlined in the proposed policy are as follows. And from my perspective as a records manager and the custodian of records, the major thing that should be expressed by this policy is that the Outlook Exchange servers are not a retention tool, which means they should not be a long-term storage location for records. So emails that would be classified as records should not be maintained in Outlook, but rather be saved and maintained elsewhere within the town's infrastructure. And once we kind of get the policy refined, we can get more documents and guidance on what that looks like and how you can save things and where you would save things to. But like, for example, the way that I manage my inbox is anything that does have enduring value or routine value, I will save to an external place in the Microsoft servers for our SharePoint, and then everything else I delete. And then the deleted emails get deleted. After this policy was adopted, the deleted emails would get deleted every 30 days. That provides the ability for us to just manage our inboxes and make sure that we're not keeping a bunch of data that we don't need and do not want to maintain. And so that's why I do it that way, and that would be my recommendation for everyone. So the second point is that email communications are considered records or may be considered records pursuant to CORA, and then it defines what types of, what the different classes of records could be with emails. So those are emails that are enduring long-term value. Those need to be retained permanently, and things that just have a routine value can be retained for 2 years.
Give us some examples of what you mean by enduring and routine. I'm very confused about what's required, and I'd like some specific examples of the type of things that are enduring. I'm very confused.
So if someone were to send out, so there's, the statement says, records that relate to policy issues and actions or activities in which an important precedent is set. So if you're sending out email communications about these policy issues or actions, you're saying, okay, the town is adopting this policy and that precedent is set in that email, that would be something that is a permanent retention.
And let me give you an example. We've encouraged council members, if they have questions, to send the questions to the town manager and not necessarily the attorney. Is it required to maintain those, are those considered enduring?
No, and a lot of those things would also be council work product, which is something that's excluded from CORA. So things that are in process that the council is working on and there's a back and forth like that, those are excluded from being released under CORA.
So in essence, from a council member standpoint, from an enduring product standpoint, I see very little emails that we would ever have that would be an enduring product because the council establishes policies, not individuals. So no individual, including myself, can send out something that says, this is the town's policy, because we don't have the authority to individually establish that policy.
Correct. And additionally, we can provide more documentation about what this looks like and internal like memos that kind of outline specific examples and guidance on this. And if you ever have questions, it would be encouraged to reach out to myself, Jennifer, John, to just verify what the value of those things would be long-term.
Can I just jump in?
Could the attorney please speak?
So these categories actually are set up in the Colorado Municipal Records Retention Schedule. So it's, these categories are set up in correspondence and general documentation. The enduring long-term value, routine value, and transitory value, which is basically a non-record, something that should be deleted. So this is, the policy is really a records management system so that you're not keeping documents longer than you need to. You know, you have limited storage and you know, it's also a best practices in terms of you all are subject to core requirements, and so it's a best practice to be consistent with the records retention schedule, so that, you know, town staff and potentially myself are not spending the time having to go through thousands and thousands and thousands of emails that should have been deleted, because there's no reason to keep them. They don't serve any purpose.
Sometimes keeping emails that have subjects that is a benefit to go back and reference. To, wait a minute, I heard something from somebody back here, it was transitory, and I use my email address totally differently than the clerk does, because I can go back 6 months and say, wait a minute, that's something we've talked about, and it may be a routine record, but I don't keep a pristine email box. It grows, and I do delete emails that are transitory in nature, but a lot of the routine stuff I actually do keep back because I need it to refresh my memory. And you're first, and then John.
A question, then comment. Am I understanding right that you're going to auto-delete after 2 years?
That is not written into this version of the policy.
Is there going to be some, and I guess the follow-up question that is, by what mechanism are you going to enforce this expectation that we delete emails?
In the current policy, there is not a mechanism that does that. The only thing that is written into this policy that would automatically delete things is deleted emails will be permanently deleted from the system after 30 days.
Okay. I guess I'm not quite understanding what additional action this is compelling out of staff and council members, other than if something is meeting that high bar of permanent records retention, that somebody's going to store that in a means other than the Exchange server.
Also asks that messages that are of routine value be saved outside of the Exchange server.
But let me ask you again, now define for me what falls in the category. Give me examples of what's routine and what is transitory.
I have a question related to what we were just talking about.
Right, go ahead.
So if I might, what I'm understanding is it allows us, this policy allows us to delete emails that are not falling to this high standard, but does not require us to delete that. So if the mayor's process is to keep emails for 3 years and review back to them, that's okay. But if, and just my process is I delete emails after a year, right? It allows me to do it, it doesn't require me to. Am I understanding that correctly?
But the problem is that those items that are routine have to be saved somewhere for 2 years. We can't delete those any time in that 2-year period. There has to be a process set up, and the council members would then be required to do whatever is needed so that they can be routine saved. And what I'm seeing in here is you want them in PDFs or something like that, which could be significantly time consuming for some of us to save those in PDF format for you. That's what, as I look at this, I see this as a potential tremendous administrative burden on volunteer council members who are working for minimum wage.
Yeah, I'm not doing it. I guess I'll say I'm not doing that. Because I've come from a system that, we had multiple years of memory, and everyone loves to say, email is not a knowledge management system. You should really put it somewhere else. And then there's no convenient, easy, and sensible system that's provided to automatically transfer information out of your email database into that to be searchable and usable when you're like, well, we had a conversation about this. And if you want something that is more secure and permanent than a cloud-based Exchange server, I don't know where you're planning on putting these PDFs that's better than that, but isn't this what we're paying for?
Councilmember Davis.
You know, when I read this, I was looking, is there any automatic way that this can be done? And that makes sense, because this is gonna be time consuming. And like the mayor, I don't know what I'm supposed to save or not. As president of an HOA, my attorney says I have to save everything. And I can never delete, and there's a liability issue there. So I don't know what the balance is.
What will it save us? Like, in the technology day and age we're in right now, a small town operating with minimal staff and minimal council, what realistically would it save us by going through the process of identifying all these and saving them for 2 years versus 5 years versus permanently? Like, why can't we just save everything for 10 years and then just delete everything after 10 years or whatever that is?
There are risks to keeping records beyond the retention period. You don't want to keep all of those records.
Okay.
So the other alternative that some municipalities use is we can put a retention period on the email inboxes of 2 years. And we can use the email inbox in that way, and then only escalate things that are permanent retention, which we discussed are going to be very few circumstances, but that would have to be something that we were all comfortable with as well.
I mean, I would be categorically opposed, having experienced a system that had unlimited retention and then went to 1 year retention, and our current model is, oh, I already did that work, but it was over a year ago, so the organization must want me to spend my time redoing that work. You never know what you need to save. It's too much effort to know what you need to save. And without a knowledge management system that has an automated transfer of that data, so that this body of knowledge that lives and breathes through email is not transferred somewhere else where it is easily searchable, if you don't have that, then setting a limited term retention thing vastly outweighs whatever liability protection you think you're gaining by keeping records longer than you're strictly required to. And I know that council might disagree with me on that point, but that's your job to try and limit our liability. And I'm looking at this from an institutional knowledge standpoint.
I would agree with that. I have a 90-day retention policy for my professional career, and that is a lot more limiting than 1 year. And so I'd like to see a balance, right, where we can keep that institutional knowledge, but then also reduce our liability. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, how about something like this? I'll just throw it out to council. The enduring record requirement is one I am concerned about, but it's also going to be few and far between for council. So I would recommend that if any council member has an enduring requirement, in fact, I would recommend you rethink how you want to save those records, whether it's required to be saved really in a PDF or whatever. I know you're thinking from accessibility and all of that, but if folks are after emails, then probably the answer ought to be a core request versus everything immediately online and available. The council members who have enduring would then be given a requirement to place that in a town folder that they could be accessed and treated in that manner as a permanent retention. And the clerk could then evaluate if this is indeed something that needs to be retained, because we'll probably be more conservative than we need to be. And then everything else is in the routines category. And then by just nature, in 2 years, it would get deleted. It's all searchable in the near term, but it gets deleted automatically by the Exchange server in 2 years. I think all of us could live with a 2-year period, probably could live with about a 2-year period, since our half-life here is at max 8. could live with potentially everything in our inboxes being too. If we put it in another folder, that would mean we wouldn't want it automatically deleted too. But then we could, that could potentially be an option. What do you guys think?
I think that 4 years sounds a lot better, but if you're gonna say that you can drop stuff that you don't want in another folder, or in an archive folder and not have that subject to auto deletion, I fully accept that. Just know that I'm dropping my entire inbox in there.
Yeah, Carol?
So, back to Jennifer and Maddie, my understanding is your intent here is to try to control the massive amounts of email that you have to review should you get a request for a certain topic, yes?
That is one component of, yes.
It seems like the most compelling one, because it is very difficult to review emails and decide which ones have that enduring value. And so I think you're asking us to do some of that work and make those decisions. And we simply are looking for something that's more clear about, and what do we do with that? So that A, we can still access it and you can access it without having to access all the emails to include, hey, you coming tonight? Oh, I forgot, right? That's one of your objections,
Or you ask the question of the attorney or the clerk or someone which doesn't fall into those categories.
Yeah, I can't help but think maybe some of the bigger issues are with staff. So for example, if someone is trying to do a development, property development, and that individual is going back to Lindsay and say, I don't understand this, can you interpret it? He's giving his read on policy, and that's probably something that needs to be retained, whereas some of our discussions, our decision-making is done here, right? Just trying to get my head around what is, what isn't important.
I think part of the disconnect may be that, well, at least that I'm having, I won't speak for Maddie, but we don't know what all the communications that you send and what emails you send and what may be of importance and that you want to keep. So that's part of the issue. I mean, when you get an email about an agenda packet, once that meeting is over, you don't need that email. That agenda is saved by the town clerk. Agendas are enduring value documents, and those have to be saved forever. But your emails about them don't. So it's hard.
But if we get an email from the clerk that has a meeting package in it, we don't have to save that because that's already being saved by the town.
Correct. Yes, you don't have to say that. That's, yeah.
I guess I want to paraphrase, or because I think a lot of people are kind of confused as to what's legally required and what's not. As I read the proposal right now, it's incumbent on us to decide, is this a irrelevant non-record, and we can just delete it. And we can use our own discretion how long we keep those ourselves. So we just, like I like to delete. So my question really is, I just want to make sure I don't delete anything that's routine. And so if I had a definition more clear than this, I think, that is routine. I'm not going to for sure not do it, but I'd like the discretion of being able to just delete my emails. You know, when
Almost all of them, right?
well, certainly the non-record.
Right.
But I guess I'm fine with the process you've laid out here, as long as I know what's routine and I don't violate it, because I will delete all the others.
But not everyone does that, and that's our problem. And all of us believe ours is the right way to do it, so.
But if they want to keep it,
But
if you want to keep it's burden on them if they go through.
But then the question is, how do they want that data to be transmitted to them? And if I have to transmit all of what would be routine communications, and take the time to PDF that and put that in another folder, that could be very time consuming for a council member.
Well, my assumption was that you would assume that even though he didn't delete it, I deleted it, all of those would be in that category too, if you needed it. As opposed to doing something with the PDF, having everybody responsible to do the PDF. It would just all be in one file.
I think this is just too generic. To me, routine means administrative stuff that I don't need to keep it all. And if that is not true, can you give us 5 examples of routine that you would expect us to maintain?
So the records retention schedule outlines some examples of what routine email messages might be. So to include routine email messages, letters or memoranda, reading or chronological files that contain duplicates of memos or letters also filed elsewhere, routine requests for information, transmittal documents, etc. I mean, I don't think that we need to have all of those saved in PDFs. This policy is just an example of what a policy could be. And I think that it's reasonable to keep them in your inbox or in your email inbox, but I would have concerns if we are not having retention limits on email inboxes. And if we have no retention limits on email inboxes, I think the policy would need to address what we do with email inboxes when council members leave office, for example, or staff members leave their position.
Councilmember Permit.
First, I would totally agree that you need to have some sort of policy about what happens when people leave and what do you do with that inbox. I have a question for our town attorney about Cora compliance and limits. So let's say hypothetically in 2 years, someone files a Cora request that says, I want every email that town staff and council have sent about bear-proofing trash cans. One, can you comply with that by issuing a request for us to use relevant search terms to scour our emails rather than one by one attack through our inbox? And 2, what are the Cora limits before there are fees for time spent that the person making a Cora request occurs?
And Maddie can really address this. I mean, she's the one who responds to those requests.
So we do have the capability to do that for your first question. We can also do that from the back end. So if we're maintaining things in the email system that are of routine value, it would be reasonable for staff to do that from the back end. I think that is a separate conversation. But 2, it's after the first hour, there's a fee for each hour of research and retrieval. And while it might not take you folks a long time to gather those emails, if you use targeted search terms, staff do have to read through and make sure that there's nothing that needs to be redacted or removed from those emails or isn't applicable to Cora for some reason.
I would ask, I think that there's been a lot of valuable feedback from our perspective, and I don't think we're going to boil the ocean right here in creating a resolution that we're all behind. I would wonder if we could allow staff to take the feedback, workshop this, and potentially bring it back to us at a future workshop.
Okay with that?
Yeah.
We've got to find something that's workable, particularly as we recognize our responsibilities and we can legally meet those responsibilities. And I think you could treat the category of enduring much differently than you treat the category of routine. And you've heard our concerns about our requirements. We definitely want to follow state law in that area. So please, staff, come back to us, take a look at this, you've heard our comments, come back to us at a future workshop. Is that okay with the rest of the council? Great. Next item, and I'm going to say this, with your concurrence, there's one item I think we do need to get to today, and it's the proposed revisions to the lodging tax ordinance. I'm not sure that's a big time sum, but we could probably punt again on the general nuisance ordinance. That's probably more expensive. And what I would propose, since we have dinner out in the entryway, that we again do what we've done in the past. Get your dinner. We could come back about 6:30-ish, 6:30, and then address the proposed revisions to the lodging tax ordinance, and that would be then we'd adjourn after that. Is that acceptable to the council? Yes. In that case, we're in recess until 6:30. I'll call the meeting back to order from recess, and the last item we will consider is the proposed revisions to the lodging tax ordinance, and with that, I'll turn it over to the town manager.
And I will turn it over to our financial director, Heidi Fox.
Good evening. All right, Heidi Fox, Finance Director. Thank you. Sorry. All right, Heidi Fox, Finance Director. So staff is requesting for the council to discuss the monthly tax filing as an ordinance for ordinance 2024-0-14, section 7, where it states every vendor shall on or before the 20th day of each month make a return to the town of Keystone for their lodging tax. And what we would like to do is have it more in line with the Department of Revenue. They do periodic filings for people that could be monthly, quarterly, or annually, and it's determined by their sales and the amount of sales tax that they remit. And if you look on page 2, I did a little graph there of what the other municipalities in the county do. And most of them align with the Department of Revenue. I didn't have Dylan at that time, but I did get theirs today, and they also align with the Department of Revenue. Breckenridge, there's a little bit different, but I talked to them, and they are actually going to align with the Department of Revenue sometime soon. So really, the only town that doesn't is Silverthorne, which they require monthly filings from each and every STR owner. But they only have a couple hundred STRs. So keep in mind too that when the town of Keystone was unincorporated Summit County, they aligned with the Department of Revenue since they're a statutory town, and so they remitted all their tax filings through them. So now that the town of Keystone is their own entity, and we have our own ordinance remitting monthly tax returns for a number of self-renting people, it's a burden on them, because then they have to remember to remit to us monthly, where they remit to Department of Revenue their sales tax either quarterly or annually, because they just don't have that that revenue coming in. And then just for staff, what that means for us is that we're just going to accept 0 tax filing each month from several STR owners. So we thought we'd bring it up so you guys can discuss if you guys want to continue with the monthly, or if you want to align more with the Department of Revenue. And with that being said, basically I have a way, if they tell me that they remit quarterly or annually with the Department of Revenue, I do have a way to look that up with the Department of Revenue to verify that. The other request is
that, in talking to the other municipalities, the staff actually has the authority to amend the filing period based on their rental patterns. So I'll give you an example. In my memo, that basically says, like, for example, if an owner of a 10-bedroom property charging $1,400 per night may only rent the property for the 2 weeks during Christmas, resulting in annual rental income of just under 20 grand. And so based on that, what other municipalities do is they just let them file annually. That way they don't have to do $0 returns. I don't know how many cases we would have on that, but the staff would just like to be able to, if there is a circumstance that warrants that and it makes sense, that we would be able to correct that for them.
Questions?
So if Heike, could you clarify, so, for instance, Colorado Department of Revenue, if you have 300 or more in sales tax per month, you have to file monthly. How is that 300 determined? So would a SDR have to file monthly some months? And
no, whatever their, so however they fall, if they fall under the monthly remittance, they have to file monthly whether they have sales or not. So if they're a monthly filer and they have 0 sales 1 month, they file a $0 return. Same with quarterly and annually, they still.
Is that $300 based on the average? So if the two-week example you provided, right, and I don't know the math off the top of my head, I'm not gonna embarrass myself, but let's say they get $299 for the year. Would they then fall under monthly for the entire year?
If they, so $300 or more in sales tax per month is the way the Department of Revenue. So if they're remitting more than $300 or more per month in sales tax revenue to the Department of Revenue, then they fall under the monthly.
But that's based on a yearly
a
average.
yearly average or?
No, that's on a monthly. So basically, it'd be $300 times 12.
So
for
yearly
sales tax.
average.
Yeah. Well, this is a monthly average.
Well,
So if in January they hit 300, but in February they don't, do they have to file monthly for the entire year?
Well, it's
Just
based
one
on,
month?
they do it based on an average. So basically, it's the customer, so what it's based on is the customer telling the Department of Revenue what they think they're gonna remit sales tax wise. And then based on that, then they determine if they're gonna be monthly, quarterly, or annually. Now, based on patterns, once it actually comes up, and let's say that they say that they're gonna remit between $15 and $300 per month in sales tax, and then they're in that quarterly filing period. If the Department of Revenue sees that they're actually collecting and remitting more, they'll move them to the monthly.
Okay, but if you're saying averages though, your example, for example, would be well over $300 per month. But they're just gonna be annual, so it's not just on an average monthly basis. You can't go to annual.
Well, yeah, annually is if they're collecting less than $15 in sales tax per month.
But let's talk, I think you're getting a bit confused. So if I make, let's say I rent my place out for 4 months, I have $900 in payments each of those 4 months, or $901. So I average above $300 a month in payments. Do I have to file monthly, or do I just have to file monthly in those 4 months when I have over $301, or 900? How do you determine the 300? Is it month by month, or is it 12 months of?
So with the Department they ask you, like, what you think you're gonna be remaining month by month. And so if you say, hey, I'm gonna be remaining more than $300 in sales tax month by month, then you're gonna be under that month by month. If you're remitting anywhere from $15 to $300 in sales tax per month, they're gonna make you go to quarterly.
But you're missing the point. There'll be months when you don't have any sales tax, and there'll be months when you have $700 in sales tax.
And it's, so it's an average. So if you have, you know, like, okay, so basically we're seasonal, right? And so you've got January, February, March of high season, and you've got probably what, April, May, June of low season, and then June, July, August, September, October. So, yeah, so those months of the off season or shoulder season that we have, when their sales drop, they still have to remit monthly if they fall into that monthly thing.
To give you an idea of what it amounts to in sales for us, all right, for sales for the guy versus the tax generated, which is easier, I think, for all of us to understand. The $300 is based on $180,000 per year in actual retail sales and subject to tax. The $15 is based on $9,000 of sales per year. So I would recommend, instead of giving limits by month for them, just say that they have to file with us during the same time, follow the same filing schedule they have to follow with the state of Colorado.
Well, that's what I'm asking for.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah, my first little graph that I had, like for you guys, I was putting it by sales amount, but then we all thought that it was a little confusing to show sales amount when the Department of Revenue and other municipalities show sales tax, so we were trying to keep it consistent.
Carol.
I came in here respecting your desire to make it more accessible and easy for those who have to remit sales tax to us. And I thought, I looked at that table, my eyes crossed, and I thought, well, we just require it quarterly. That will be simple. But your explanation, excuse me, tonight was very helpful. They essentially sign up for something with Colorado, and you are suggesting we follow suit and have them do exactly with us what they're doing with them. I think that's the simplest, and you sold your case when you said that allows you to check on it. Good job.
Yeah, I'm in full agreement with the simplicity of aligning with the state, as long as we can kind of double check. I do think we probably lose out a little bit of time value of money, but I don't think it'll be insignificant. So I think we want to be fair and simple as we can for the taxpayer.
Yeah. Given the data I've looked at, my guess is if we went with the state approach, then you would be dealing with somewhere 10 to 15 reports a month that are going to exceed the threshold, and that's largely the large management companies. You're going to be dealing 12 to 1,300 quarterlies, and the rest are going to be annual. That's just my quick look.
Although that begs the question, when a property, one of the big property management companies, they don't file for all of them.
Yes, they do.
They collected, they do that rather than based on the individual?
Yeah, so
Okay.
most of the property.
Thank you.
Most of the bigger. Got it. Yeah, okay.
That was gonna be my question, so the management companies.
Yeah. If you're managed by somebody, they handle all your tax filings for you.
Yeah, but I thought they did it per individual.
But it's under one tax ID.
Okay, good.
And to give you sort of a perspective, like out of our, just for easy math, 2,000 STR rentals that are licensed, I know it's a little bit less than that, but about 3/4 of them, marketplace facilitators like so VRBO and Airbnb, and then the local property, the bigger local property managers, they do about 3/4. of our sales tax filings. So then we're dealing with about a quarter, 400 or 500 individuals who remit on their own.
And because we're getting the high value ones in that 3/4, the high value money that Dan mentioned is gonna be relatively low to non-existent.
Yeah, the big revenue comes from the big three property management companies in Keystone, Vail Resorts, Summit County Mountain Retreats, and Summit Cove, and those are publicly touted as the top three property management companies. Richard?
Just a quick question. The way I read this, it would also be easier for the staff, correct?
Well, it would be, yeah.
Little simple.
Exactly, yeah. And then it's nice too, because then, when we get our sales tax reports from the state of Colorado, we can kind of, match them up without like doing a bunch of math.
Yeah, and what also makes it easy is the state, they're remitting to us 2% of sales, and it's a 2% lodging tax. And most of those folks who do it paying the lodging tax aren't doing other retail sales. And so it makes it really easy to say, are we getting our money?
Yeah. Go for it.
Is anyone against it?
Can we have a thumbs up and say, yep, we're gonna do that?
And how do we feel about the allowing staff discretion in those few unique situations where there might be someone who rents out a high-value property, but only a couple weeks a year?
I didn't understand.
Well,
Staff discretion.
Anybody, yes. I agree.
Yeah, so someone could certainly qualify for quarterly, just in the amount of money they make renting their place out over 2 holiday weeks. Do we make them file all the quarters when they're not renting the place out?
No.
Yeah.
Let the staff decide it. That's a staff decision.
Yeah, and those will be so few and far between.
Yeah, I don't think we have many of those in Keystone. All right.
You've made a lot of STR owners very happy.
I think it was a mistake.
Yeah, no, the key is, I don't think any of it's understood, at least I didn't.
Yeah.
I was ignorant about how, and I should have known better, but how the state had different filing requirements based on your volume of taxes.
On that same note, are you going to use the same form that the Colorado law uses? You're creating your own, even though it's going to be similar that they can just move dollar figures over, right?
Well, right, yeah, well, the Department of Revenue has their own system, and currently, our system is in-house just because there's not enough time before that February 20th filing for me to get something up and going. And so by the end of this month, I'm hoping to, I've been vetting people, systems to see which system would be the best one for us. And it'll take them a couple months, once we sign a contract with them, to get everything up and running.
Wait, sign a contract with who? I don't understand
It's
this.
a contract with a vendor.
With a vendor, yeah, to help us.
We're paying for a vendor to collect this money.
Well, for a system,
Oh, for the software
a
system.
filing system
Okay.
that will know who files and who doesn't file, and those people who don't file, then we can send a notice out easily. Right now, I have it in-house, and so once that 20th comes, then basically I have to take Maddie's Excel spreadsheet that she gives me of all our STR owners and compare it to who has filed to see who hasn't filed, and then send out notices based on that.
The form they fill out will be similar to the state, but
Yeah,
not exact.
Yeah,
But-
no, the
What
form's
makes them
really,
do
the
different?
form is really simple, they just ask for their gross lodging sales, and then any deductions for, like government or, religious organizations, any tax exempt organizations, and then 2% on top of that.
And there'll be some additional information, I assume, that'll be on that form, that wouldn't be on the state form, like I would guess you would probably ask for their STR number,
Yes.
license number, whereas the state doesn't care about STR license number. But that's the only way that you have to verify that, yeah, our STR licenses are indeed paid.
Right, the idea, they have to put another STR license number in their name, where the state will have their state sales tax number. Okay. And then, just for the sake of conversation, in case anybody's listening to this, so we have to amend the ordinance, so next meeting, we'll work with our legal and getting an ordinance to you guys. And then it has to take a mandatory 30-day waiting period, so that won't take effect until the April filing.
2 readings.
Oh, 2 readings?
Yes, 2 readings for an ordinance. So it's actually, the ordinance becomes effective, the ordinance would be approved by us on March 11th, and so the ordinance would go into effect on April 11th, which is still before your April filing.
Perfect. Which then aligns with quarterly filings.
All right. Anything else? Thank you very much. With no other business, the meeting is adjourned, and our council meeting starts in about 2 minutes. So as we transition, probably be a little.
Can you just,
I can just mute.
no,